My name is Jenna Morgan, and I'm 33 years old. If you'd asked me 10 years ago where I thought I'd be by now, I would have painted you a picture of a perfect life, a warm home, two steady incomes, and a family that actually felt like a family. Instead, it's just me and my daughter Ava, and most days, that feels more than enough. Other days, like the day my sister announced her engagement, it feels like the universe is reminding me I'll never measure up to what my parents expected. I'm a single mom, an elementary school teacher in Portland, Oregon. 7 years ago, my ex-husband Tyler decided that fatherhood wasn't for him. One afternoon, he came home, told me he needed to find himself, and left without so much as a plan to say goodbye to Ava. She was 2 years old. She doesn't remember the day he walked out, but I remember every detail. Since then, it's been me figuring out how to be everything to my little girl. I grade papers late into the night after she's asleep, juggle parent-teacher conferences with my own teaching schedule, and do the math every month to stretch my paycheck over rent, groceries, and Ava's after-school activities. Ava and I have built a sweet, imperfect life together. Our small two-bedroom apartment is filled with her drawings. Fairies, foxes, flowers. On the fridge are pictures of the two of us at the park, her gap-toothed smile shining up at the camera. We have traditions that are ours alone: pancake breakfasts on Sundays, movie nights on the first Friday of every month, and evening walks when the Oregon rain lets up. But the other side of my life, my family, is something I've never quite managed to make peace with. Growing up in the Morgans' house. If you were to ask anyone in Portland's West Hills about the Morgans, they'd probably tell you we're an upstanding family. My dad, Henry Morgan, is a real estate developer who seems to know everyone. My mom, Margaret, spent years running local charity galas and sitting on boards for various civic causes. But behind closed doors, their priorities were crystal clear. My younger sister Lauren is 2 years my junior but has always been miles ahead in their eyes. Even as kids, I was the one with scraped knees and messy pigtails, while Lauren had perfect posture and an easy smile that made adults melt. At first, I thought it was in my head, but it wasn't. I remember being 13 and coming home with a report card full of A's and one B+. I handed it to my mom with hope in my chest. She smiled and said, "That's fine, Jenna," before turning to Lauren, who was showing off a first-place ribbon from a gymnastics meet. My dad clapped her on the shoulder, beaming. Lauren was always the one they bragged about. When she graduated from Stanford with a marketing degree, paid for in full by my parents, they threw her a catered garden party with over 100 guests. When I graduated from Portland State with my teaching degree, funded by scholarships and a part-time job, I got a dinner at Olive Garden. No one ever said I was a disappointment outright. But their praise for Lauren's ambition and the polite nods they gave my modest successes told the story just as clearly. Building my own life. After Tyler left, my parents were gracious enough to help a little, but it was never unconditional. They'd offer to cover a bill and then slip in a comment about how, maybe if you'd married someone more reliable, or you really should have picked a more lucrative career. They meant well, I think, but their well-meaning always came wrapped in condescension. Eventually, I stopped asking for help. I worked hard to carve out a life for Ava and me, one that didn't rely on their approval. But when Lauren announced she was getting engaged to Ethan Brooks, my old insecurities came rushing back. Ethan isn't just any fiancé, he's the son of Gerald Brooks, owner of Brooks Development, one of the biggest real estate firms in Oregon. My parents were practically giddy. I'd never seen my mom so animated, telling everyone how Lauren had finally found her equal. They threw a dinner to celebrate the engagement, and as we sat around the table, I felt like a footnote in my own family. "This is such a good match," My mother sighed dreamily. Lauren always had such good judgment. I took a sip of water to avoid saying something I'd regret. Ava sat beside me, quietly coloring the corner of a napkin with a purple pen she'd found in my purse. She looked up at me with her wide blue eyes and whispered, "Can we go home soon?" I squeezed her hand under the table. "Soon, sweetie." The invitation. A few weeks later, the invitation arrived. It was thick, cream-colored cardstock with embossed gold lettering. A handwritten note in Lauren's cursive was tucked inside. "Jenna, I hope you and Ava will join us for this special day. It would mean a lot to have you both there." I stared at the words for a long time, unsure what I felt. Part of me was tempted to decline, to protect Ava and myself from the quiet humiliations that always seemed to surface around my family, but another part of me clung to hope. Maybe this was the moment things would change. Maybe my sister's new chapter would be a chance to mend fences. When Ava got home from school that day, she found me holding the invitation. "What's that?" she asked. "It's an invitation to Aunt Lauren's engagement party." "Are we going?" I hesitated. "Yes," I said finally. "I think we should." Her face lit up. "Will there be cake?" I laughed, in spite of everything. "I'm sure there will be." And so, against my better judgment, I decided we would go. I had no idea that one spilled glass of juice would become the moment everything broke wide open. The weeks before the engagement party felt like a strange combination of anticipation and dread. Every time I thought about declining, I pictured Ava's hopeful face and her excitement about seeing her grandparents and Aunt Lauren. I couldn't bring myself to disappoint her. Not yet. Instead, I decided to focus on the things I could control. Shopping for the big day. Our first priority was clothes. Lauren's note had specified cocktail attire, which was her polite way of saying she expected her guests to look expensive. My teaching salary didn't exactly leave room for designer labels, but I wanted Ava to feel special. So on a rainy Saturday afternoon, we walked into a department store that usually felt too fancy for me to browse. Ava's eyes went wide as she looked at all the sparkly dresses lined up like tiny fairy gowns. "Mom," she whispered, "they look like princess dresses." I smiled, feeling the old pang of guilt that I couldn't give her everything she deserved. "We'll find something perfect," I told her. We did. In the children's section, tucked on a sale rack, we discovered a pale pink dress with delicate embroidered flowers along the hem. Ava pressed it to her chest and beamed. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "It's yours," I said, ignoring the price tag for the moment. For myself, I picked a simple teal cocktail dress with capped sleeves. It wasn't fancy, but it was flattering and made me feel pulled together. At the register, I handed over my debit card and tried not to flinch when the total flashed on the screen. It was worth it. Practice makes perfect. That night, I laid out Ava's dress across the back of the couch and called her over. "Let's practice," I said. "Practice what?" she asked, curling up next to me. "Manners," I told her, "and grown-up party stuff." Her eyes widened, like saying, "Pleased to meet you?" "Exactly." We spent the evening rehearsing polite greetings, practicing how to hold a glass with both hands, and going over all the little details I knew would matter to Lauren. "Remember, if you feel shy or don't know what to say, you can always come stand by me," I said. Ava nodded solemnly. "Will Grandma and Grandpa be nice this time?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. "I think so," I hedged. "They're excited about Aunt Lauren's big day." Ava frowned, considering that. "I'll be extra good," she said, "so they don't get mad." My chest ached. "No one should get mad at you, sweetheart," I whispered, pulling her into my lap. "You're wonderful, just the way you are." She rested her head against my shoulder. "I'll still be careful," she murmured. I held her a little tighter. "The day arrives." The morning of the party dawned bright and unseasonably warm for April in Portland. Sunshine streamed through our kitchen window as I made Ava her favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes. You know, I teased. Most people don't get a fancy breakfast and a fancy party in the same day. Ava giggled, her hair a halo of curls around her face. Does that make me fancy? She asked. Absolutely, I said. By early afternoon, the excitement had started to build. I zipped Ava into her pink dress and watched her twirl, the skirt fanning out around her legs. She looked so proud. You look beautiful, I told her. She reached for the small silver hair clip I'd bought the week before. Will you put this in? I pinned the clip just above her ear and kissed her cheek. Perfect, I whispered. I got ready quickly, smoothing my dress and applying a little mascara. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I felt something I hadn't expected. Resolve. No matter how the day went, I would show Ava that we deserved to be there as much as anyone else. Driving to the venue, we climbed into my 10-year-old Subaru and started the drive across town. Ava bounced in her seat, pointing out landmarks she recognized. That's where we had your birthday picnic? She squealed as we passed the rose garden. I nodded, forcing a smile. As we neared the waterfront district, the houses grew bigger and more modern, glass and steel mansions perched on manicured lawns. Finally, we turned down a long drive lined with cherry trees in bloom. At the end stood the Riverside Club, a members-only venue that seemed almost designed to make people like me feel out of place. In the parking lot, luxury cars gleamed in the afternoon light. I parked my Subaru in the far corner, ignoring the sudden flutter in my stomach. Ava craned her neck to look around. It looks like a castle, she whispered. It does, I agreed. I shut off the engine and took her hand. Ready for an adventure? She nodded. Stepping into another world inside, everything smelled like lilies and expensive perfume. White roses climbed tall glass columns, and a string quartet played softly near the entrance. Ava's eyes went wide. It's so pretty, she breathed. I squeezed her hand. It is. Lauren spotted us from across the foyer and glided over. She was wearing a fitted white dress that probably cost more than my rent. Jenna, she said, her voice smooth but cool, you made it. We wouldn't miss it, I replied. Her gaze flicked down to Ava. Hello, Ava, she said with a tight smile. Remember, this is a very grown-up event. Lots of important people here today. Ava's hand tightened in mine. She knows, I said calmly. Lauren's eyes narrowed slightly before she turned her attention back to greeting other guests. I guided Ava toward the reception area, doing my best to swallow the unease crawling up my spine. I'd told myself this day could be different. I'd told myself we'd be welcomed. But as I looked around the glittering room full of people who would never understand our life, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were already on the outside looking in. The main ballroom of the Riverside Club was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Willamette River, where sailboats glided lazily along the water. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting fractured rainbows across white linen tablecloths and towering floral arrangements. Every detail was carefully curated to impress. Ava and I paused just inside the doorway. She squeezed my hand, her small fingers trembling slightly. Remember, I whispered, crouching to meet her eyes. We're just going to smile, be polite, and enjoy ourselves. Okay? She nodded solemnly. Okay. First impressions, I guided her toward the gift table, where a mountain of packages wrapped in shimmering paper had already accumulated. Our modest gift, a framed watercolor print I'd saved up to have commissioned of the house Lauren and Ethan were buying together, looked embarrassingly small beside all the designer bags. But I placed it on the table anyway, reminding myself that thoughtfulness mattered more than price. From across the room, I could feel eyes on us, A woman in a sleek black dress whispered something to her husband, her gaze lingering on Ava's pink dress. I lifted my chin and kept walking. The first toast. An hour into the party, a server clinked a glass to signal the start of formal toasts. Lauren and Ethan stood at the front of the room, Ethan's arm draped casually around her waist. She looked exactly how I'd expected, composed, radiant, and utterly certain of her place in the world. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice carrying effortlessly across the room. "Ethan and I are so blessed to be surrounded by people who have shaped our lives and inspired us to reach higher." Her eyes drifted over our parents, who smiled up at her with such pride it almost hurt to watch. "I'd especially like to thank my parents," Lauren continued, "for teaching me the value of ambition and never settling for less than I deserve." Applause rippled through the crowd. "And to Ethan's parents," she added, "for welcoming me into their family with such warmth." More applause. I waited, just for a moment, to see if she would acknowledge me. She didn't. Instead, she set down the microphone and turned to kiss Ethan's cheek, the picture of effortless perfection. Ava looked up at me, confusion creasing her forehead. "Did Aunt Lauren forget about us?" she whispered. I swallowed the tightness in my throat. "It's okay," I murmured. "She's just nervous." But the truth was, I'd never felt so invisible. The juice incident. After the toast, servers began circulating with trays of champagne and sparkling cider. I took a glass of water, unwilling to risk alcohol loosening my tongue in front of my family. Ava tugged at my sleeve. "Can I have some juice, Mom?" "Of course," I said, relieved for a reason to step away. We made our way to the refreshment table. Ava picked out a small glass of bright red cranberry juice, her tongue poking out as she concentrated on holding it steady with both hands. "2 hands," she recited softly, repeating the phrase we'd practiced. I smiled. "That's right." As we turned to walk back, a man in an expensive gray suit, gesturing broadly as he spoke, stepped backward into Ava's path. His elbow knocked her arm, and in an instant the juice splashed forward in a crimson arc, landing squarely on the front of Lauren's pristine white gown. Time seemed to slow. I watched the stain bloom across her bodice like an accusation. Ava froze, her eyes going round with horror. "I'm sorry," she gasped. I didn't mean—" The slap Lauren's head snapped toward us, her face contorting in disbelief and then rage. "You little brat!" she hissed, her voice so sharp it sliced through the chatter in the room. "Aunt Lauren, Ava began, but before she could finish, Lauren's hand flashed out. The crack of palm against skin was so loud it silenced the entire ballroom. Ava fell backward, her glass shattering on the polished floor. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Ava began to cry, high, thin sobs that cut straight through my chest. I lunged forward and scooped her into my arms, my hands trembling. "It's okay, baby," I whispered, though nothing was okay. "I'm here." The blame. My parents rushed over, but not to comfort Ava. Margaret Morgan looked at Lauren's ruined gown, aghast. "Oh, sweetheart," she moaned, brushing ineffectually at the stain. "This was custom. Jenna, how could you let this happen?" I stared at her, stunned. "She's 9, I said. My voice was hoarse. It was an accident, and Lauren just hit her. Henry glared at me, his face dark. "Maybe if you taught your child some discipline," he snapped, "she'd know how to behave." Ava pressed her face into my shoulder, her tears soaking through my dress. I looked from my parents to my sister, who stood trembling, her eyes wild, and something inside me snapped clean in two. I set Ava gently on her feet and turned to Lauren. "You will apologize to her," I said, my voice low and shaking. "Right now." Lauren's mouth twisted. "Apologize? To this This child who just ruined the most important day of my life? You struck a 9-year-old, I said, louder now, in front of everyone. Around us, guests were recording with their phones. Someone murmured, "Did you see that?" Another woman covered her mouth in horror. Lauren's eyes flickered to the cameras, then back to me. "Leave," she spat, "before you embarrass yourself any further." I looked at my daughter's tear-streaked face. "No," I said, finally steady. "We're not going anywhere." Drawing the line. 2 security guards appeared at the edge of the circle, drawn by the commotion. "Ma'am," one said carefully, "is there a problem here?" "Yes," I said. My voice was calm, deadly calm. "My sister assaulted my daughter." Lauren's face went red. "You're being ridiculous," she hissed. "No," I replied. "I'm being a mother." And as I held Ava against me, feeling her little heart hammering in her chest, I knew exactly what I had to do. The security guards exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, a tall woman with dark hair pulled into a neat bun, stepped closer to me. "Ma'am," she said gently, "do you want us to escort you and your daughter to a private area?" I looked around the ballroom. Hundreds of eyes were watching. Some people were pretending to look elsewhere while angling their phones to record. Others didn't even bother to hide their fascination. "No," I said. My voice felt stronger than I expected. "I want to file a report. My daughter was assaulted." Lauren let out a strangled laugh. "Don't be absurd, Jenna. It was a slap. She ruined my dress. You saw it. Everyone did." I held Ava tighter. "That doesn't give you the right to lay a hand on her." Henry Morgan stepped forward, his mouth set in a hard line. "Jenna, you're making a spectacle," he hissed under his breath. "You need to leave before you embarrass this family any further." "This family," I said, feeling something sharp and cold settle into place inside me, "has been embarrassing itself for a long time." My mother looked at me with eyes that had never been particularly soft. "I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen," I added. "I'm calling the police." And I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. The threats. "Jenna," Lauren snapped, "you are not doing this." But I ignored her. I dialed 911 and hit speaker. Ava clung to my waist, her small body trembling. "911, what is your emergency?" I took a shaky breath. "My name is Jenna Morgan. I'm at the Riverside Club in Portland. My 9-year-old daughter was just struck in the face by an adult. She has a visible injury, and we need assistance." A collective gasp rippled through the nearest group of onlookers. Lauren's fiancé, Ethan, finally stepped forward. "Jenna," he began, lifting his hands in a placating gesture. "I know you're upset, but let's be reasonable." "No," I said, cutting him off. "Reasonable was before she hit my daughter." "Ma'am," the dispatcher asked, "is the person who struck your daughter still present?" "Yes," I replied, my voice steady. "She's right here." Henry looked like he might explode. "Turn that off," he barked. "Turn it off right now." But I didn't, drawing the line. The dispatcher continued. "Officers are on their way. Please remain where you are. If you feel unsafe, find a secure location." "We're safe," I said, though my heart was pounding. "There are security staff present." Lauren looked around the ballroom, her eyes darting from the onlookers to the servers frozen mid-step with trays of canapes. "You've ruined everything," she whispered. "Do you understand that?" I looked her straight in the eyes. "No," I said calmly. "You did." Ethan's parents join in. Ethan's parents arrived at the edge of the gathering, their faces tight with alarm. His mother's lips thinned when she saw the red mark on Ava's cheek. "What exactly is happening here?" she asked in a clipped voice. "My sister assaulted my daughter," I explained. Lauren sputtered. She threw juice all over me." Ava's voice, small but clear, rose from my side. "It was an accident," she whispered. I said I was sorry. Ethan's father looked at Lauren with something like disgust. You hit her? He asked flatly. Lauren's mouth opened, but no words came. The police arrive. It only took 10 minutes for two uniformed Portland officers to walk briskly into the ballroom, flanked by the club's event manager. Ma'am? The taller officer asked, approaching me. You called about an assault? Yes, I said, standing straighter. This is my daughter, Ava. She was struck by my sister. The officer crouched to Ava's level, his voice gentle. Hi, sweetheart. Can I take a look? Ava lifted her chin, showing him the angry red handprint across her cheek. The officer's expression hardened. Thank you, he said softly to her. He straightened and turned back to Lauren. Ma'am, did you strike this child? Lauren pressed her hands to her temples, her composure fraying. She spilled juice on me. That's not what I asked. The officer interrupted. Did you hit her? Lauren swallowed. Yes, she whispered. Consequences. The second officer stepped forward. Ma'am, we need to take statements. You are not under arrest at this time, but this is considered assault on a minor, and it will be documented. Lauren's knees seemed to buckle. Ethan caught her arm before she could sink onto a nearby chair. Henry stepped forward, voice low and urgent. Officer, surely we can resolve this within the family. There's no need? The officer turned to face him. Sir, when we are called to a scene involving a child being struck, we are required by law to document and investigate. This isn't discretionary. My mother finally spoke, her voice brittle with rage. I hope you're satisfied, she spat, dragging the entire family through this humiliation. I met her eyes, feeling lighter than I had in years. I didn't humiliate this family, I said. You did. Every time you made excuses for cruelty. The restraining order. While the officers took statements, one of the security guards led Ava and me to a quieter corner. Mom? Ava whispered, her voice quavering. Am I in trouble? No, I told her, pressing my forehead to hers. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. She nodded, though her tears kept falling. It was in that moment I knew I couldn't let this be swept under the rug. I would file for a restraining order. I would not let Lauren or anyone make my daughter feel unsafe again. Leaving the ballroom. By the time we gathered our things to leave, the party had dissolved into a dozen small knots of murmuring guests. Some looked away when we passed. A few offered sympathetic nods. And as we stepped out into the fresh air, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. For the first time, I'd chosen to protect Ava over keeping the peace. And whatever came next, lawsuits, gossip, estrangement, I knew we would face it together. Because no designer dress, no social status, and no family legacy would ever be more important than my daughter's safety. The morning after the engagement party, I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee growing cold in my hands. Ava was still asleep, her cheek already bruising into a soft purple shadow. I had replayed the scene 100 times in my head, Lauren's hand connecting with her face, the look of betrayal in Ava's eyes, the way my parents had closed ranks around my sister instead of their granddaughter. There was no pretending this could be fixed with an apology. The first step I called a family law attorney I'd found online in the middle of the night. When the receptionist asked the reason for the consultation, I swallowed and said the words out loud. My sister hit my daughter, and I need to file for a restraining order. Saying it felt surreal, as if I were talking about someone else's life. But when I glanced down the hall toward Ava's room, the disbelief hardened into resolve. Facing the fallout by noon, the first text messages started to arrive. Mom, you've made this so much worse than it needed to be. Dad, you need to call us immediately. This is not how family handles problems. Lauren, I can't believe you would humiliate me like this. You've always been jealous. Congratulations. You finally got attention. I silenced my phone and focused on preparing Ava's lunch. I couldn't control what they said, but I could control what Ava heard from me. The restraining order. That afternoon, I met with the attorney, Rebecca, a calm woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense tone. "You are not overreacting," she said after I described everything. "This is exactly what the restraining order process is for." I nodded, tears burning my eyes. She helped me draft the paperwork. Petitioner: Jenna Morgan. Respondent: Lauren Morgan, protected person. Ava Morgan. By the time I signed the forms, my hands were steady again. Going public. I didn't expect the video to go viral. I hadn't even realized anyone was recording until my colleague from school, Elena, texted me a link. The clip was short, maybe 30 seconds, but it showed everything. Lauren's slap, Ava falling. My voice, quiet but unshakable. "You struck a 9-year-old. When I saw the view count over 200,000 hearts, I felt sick. A community reacts. That night, as Ava slept with an ice pack on her cheek, I sat on the couch reading comments. Good for this mom, protecting her child no matter who it is. This is why generational trauma keeps going, because nobody stands up to it. Imagine caring more about your dress than your niece's face. And others, crueler. Some people will do anything for attention. Single mom looking for a payout. I closed the laptop and pressed my palms to my eyes. I wasn't ready for this, but it was too late to turn back. The call from school. Monday morning, my principal, Dr. Washington, called me into her office. For a terrifying moment, I thought she was about to fire me. Instead, she closed the door and sat across from me. "Jenna," she said softly, "I want you to know we support you. What happened was unacceptable. If you need time off, we can arrange it." Relief broke over me so suddenly I had to grip the arms of my chair. "Thank you," I whispered. "I wasn't sure." "You did exactly what we train educators to do," she interrupted. "You protected your child." Ava's first therapy session. I found Dr. Karen Bennett, a child therapist specializing in trauma. Ava was nervous, twisting her hands together in her lap. "Will she think I'm bad?" she asked as we walked into the waiting room. "No, baby," I said, kissing the top of her head. "No one thinks you're bad." After the session, Dr. Bennett met me in the hallway. "She's scared, but she's strong," she told me. "The most important thing is that she knows you believe her and you're keeping her safe." I nodded, feeling something loosen in my chest for the first time in days. Lauren's silence. 2 weeks passed without a word from Lauren, except for one terse email. "Congratulations, you've destroyed our family. Hope you're satisfied." I didn't reply. Instead, I focused on Ava. We baked cookies, watched movies, and took long walks by the river. Every night, I reminded her, "You did nothing wrong." Ethan's message on a quiet Thursday evening, an email arrived from Ethan Brooks. "Jenna, I don't expect a reply, but I wanted you to hear this directly. I've postponed the wedding. The incident at the engagement party forced me to confront behaviors I can't ignore anymore. I'm so sorry for what Ava experienced. I wish you both peace." I closed the email and sat there, stunned. I didn't know if I felt vindicated, sad, or simply exhausted. Maybe all three. The restraining order hearing. 3 weeks later, we sat in a small courtroom. Lauren didn't show up. Her attorney did, trying to argue that family discipline didn't warrant a restraining order. The judge looked at the photographs of Ava's bruised face. His voice was quiet but firm. "This court grants the 1-year protective order," he said. "Contact of any kind is prohibited." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Katrim," when we got home, Ava looked up at me. "Does this mean Aunt Lauren can't hurt me anymore?" I knelt in front of her and took her hands. "That's exactly what it means." Her shoulders relaxed. "Okay," she said simply. And in that moment, I knew I'd done the right thing, no matter how many people tried to convince me otherwise. In the weeks after the court hearing, life slowly began to feel normal again, though nothing would ever be quite the same. I learned that healing isn't a single moment. It's hundreds of tiny choices, like deciding to keep Ava home for an extra day when she woke up anxious, or turning off my phone when the news cycle dredged up the video again, or taking a deep breath every time someone from my family sent me a message telling me I'd overreacted. Ava's growth, Dr. Bennett, became a constant in our lives. Once a week, Ava and I walked up the worn steps to the little house where she practiced. Some days, Ava came out of her sessions subdued. Other times, she was chattier, describing how she used dolls to act out her feelings or painted pictures of herself feeling safe. One afternoon, as we left, she slipped her hand into mine. "Mom," she said, "do you think Aunt Lauren is mad at me?" I paused on the sidewalk, the spring air cool against my skin. "No," I said carefully. "I think Aunt Lauren is mad at herself. But she doesn't know how to say that, so she blames other people." Ava thought about this, then nodded. "Dr. Bennett says sometimes grown-ups don't know how to be nice." "That's true," I said, my voice catching. "But that doesn't mean you did anything wrong." Family divided. The rest of the family fractured along predictable lines. My mother continued to leave voicemails that began with, "I'm just calling to say," and ended with thinly veiled accusations. My father stayed silent. Lauren's name never came up in the messages, as if pretending she didn't exist might erase what she had done. Some of my cousins reached out quietly, telling me they'd seen the video and supported me. It was hard to watch. One cousin, Hannah, wrote in a message, "But I'm proud of you for standing up. A lot of us wish we'd had the courage." I hadn't realized how many others had been hurt by the same patterns. The school community returning to work had been one of my biggest worries. I'd feared the whispers, the pitying looks, the judgment. Instead, I found something close to solidarity. One morning, the school secretary, Ms. Patel, stopped me in the hallway. "My mother-in-law hit me once," she said quietly. "My husband and I had to make the same decision you did. It was the hardest thing I ever did. And the best." She squeezed my hand. "Your daughter will remember that you protected her. That matters more than anything." A new routine. Ava settled back into school, her teachers understanding and watchful. We created small rituals to give her security, picking out her clothes together the night before, packing her lunch with little notes tucked inside, making time every evening to talk about her day. Some days she didn't mention the incident at all. Other times she asked, "Mom, why did Aunt Lauren care more about her dress than my face?" The question never got easier to answer. I just kept telling her the truth. "Because she forgot what's important. But you didn't, and neither did I." Unexpected support. A month after the engagement party, I received a letter with no return address. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a note written in elegant script. "For Ava's college fund. No strings attached. Use it to build the life she deserves." I stared at it for a long time, then tucked it away in the locked box where I kept important papers. It didn't matter who had sent it. What mattered was the reminder that there were people, some known, some strangers, who believed I'd done the right thing. Ethan's update. 3 months after the engagement, Ethan emailed again. "Jenna, I wanted to let you know I've ended things permanently." The engagement party opened my eyes to behaviors I can't accept in a partner. "I'm sorry for the hurt she caused you and Ava. I'm working on my own healing too." I read his message twice. Somehow, it didn't feel triumphant, just sad and inevitable. The last conversation. By late spring, my mother finally asked to see us. I agreed on the condition that it would be in a neutral public place, and only if she respected that the restraining order remained in place. We met in a corner booth at a small cafe. My mother looked older, her eyes tired. "I still think you overreacted," she said within the first 10 minutes. I waited. "But," she continued, her voice low, "I also understand why you did what you did." That was as close to an apology as she could manage, and for once, I didn't feel the old desperation to force more from her. I just nodded. Ava's courage. The night of Ava's 10th birthday, I tucked her into bed, her hair still damp from her shower. "Do you feel different now that you're 10?" I teased. She giggled. "A little." Then her face turned serious. "Mom," she whispered, "are you still proud of me?" The question hit me like a wave. I brushed her hair back from her forehead. "I am proud of you every single day," I said, my voice thick. "You are brave and kind and strong, and I am so lucky to be your mom." Her eyes closed, a peaceful smile on her face. "Okay," she murmured. Looking ahead, I knew we weren't finished healing. We still had therapy appointments, occasional nightmares, moments when the fear flared back up without warning. But we also had each other, and for the first time in a long while, that felt like enough. A message to you. If you've ever wondered whether it's worth standing up to protect your child, to defend your own boundaries, to say enough, please hear me when I say, it is. It won't be easy. People will tell you you're making it worse, that you're overreacting, that you're tearing apart your family. But sometimes, protecting the people you love means risking everything else. Sometimes it means choosing truth over tradition. And sometimes it means you stand up. Alone, at first. So the next time, you won't be alone anymore. Thank you for listening to our story. If this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Remember, you have the right to be safe, respected, and loved, no matter what.